The speed by icons function is to allow you to control your particles via an animatable target. In this case, it's actually a special icon that you can see here in the viewport. This allows you to create flocking behavior with your particles as they try to follow the animated icon. And this could be animated, for instance, to have some sort of random wobbling motion, and that can kind of reproduce the bubble motion that used to be available in the legacy systems that came with previous versions of 3D Studio Max. The basic principle for using a speed by icon operator is to assign it, then animate the icon in the manner that you require, and then set the operator's parameters to fine-tune how that animation is applied to your particles. In our example, you can see, if I press play, that I've animated the icon, and then I've used a combination of a Bezier controller to animate the icon and a noise controller to give the icon a random wobble as it travels through space. So you can see it gives us quite an interesting motion on our particles here. So let's have a look at the actual parameters on this operator before we go into how it gets applied to our particles more. The first parameter is called acceleration limit, and it's used as a maximum level of acceleration that the operator can actually apply to your particles as they follow the icon's animation. If you wish your particles to follow the icon's motion more closely, you must use higher values in this particular option here. So if I press play, you can see the icons are flying through the air and they're following our icon. And if I increase the value to 100%, you'll see that they actually follow the motion much more closely. They ape it pretty much perfectly. And then if I reduce the value down to say 20%, you can see that now they've got much more, as it were, free will. They can actually deviate from the motion of the icon a lot more, as you can see here. Now the next parameter is influence. I'll just put the acceleration limit back to 75. Now influence determines how much influence the speed icon operator has over any other speed operator in the event. So in this case, you can see I've got a speed operator here, and if I turn off speed by icon, this particular speed operator is actually just causing the particles to fly outwards from the center of our icon. So you can see there they go, they fly outwards there. Now the speed by icon operator then comes in and changes the direction of travel and the speed. It actually influences the particles. So you can see at the moment we have the influence value set to 75%. So if I turn on our particles, you can see that the influence is actually very strong and the particles hardly fly outwards anymore. If I put that down to a much lower value, you can see now that the particles are actually allowed to travel outwards much further. From the initial speed is actually in effect much more before the influence kicks in and starts to modify the motion of our particles. The other thing you can see is because the influence is actually much lower now, that there's much less influence on the actual motion of the particles. It's still there, but it isn't anywhere as strong as it was. So this actually makes sense. You can see that using a combination of acceleration limit and influence, you can control exactly how strongly the animation is applied to your particles. Something to bear in mind though with the speed by icon operator is that it will eventually take over complete control of the motion of your particles. If you use a very low influence value, it doesn't really matter, because unless you're using no influence, which is obviously pointless, it will have some influence over your particles, and eventually it will take over complete control from any previous speed and orientations that have been applied to the particles. So you can't actually layer it with other speed operators. You can't build up motions by layering multiple speed and then speed by icon operations on top. So it has that limitation. If we look at speed variation, this particular parameter, along with the minimum and maximum parameters, which you can see here and here, allows you to add some variation in the speed of the particles as they're actually affected by the operator. This value is calculated once as the particles enter the event, and it's not actually applied on each integration step. So if we turn on this value here, you can see we've got a minimum of 50% of the application of the speed value, and then we also have a maximum of 100%. So and don't forget the speed value, there's no actual speed value you can assign. The speed is purely defined by the motion of the actual icon. So if we go back to the beginning and we press play, you can see that some of the particles are actually following it very quickly and some of them are trailing behind